Hey guys, Bryson Taylor, welcome back to today's video. Today we are going to look at all the important questions and thoughts that you need to think through before going to purchase your first guitar. Now there's a couple different questions you need to ask yourself before pulling the trigger on this guitar. Now the question I would ask myself if I was a beginner looking to purchase my first guitar would be, how often do I plan on practicing and actually picking the instrument up and playing it? How much time do I have to dedicate to playing this instrument? It may sound like a silly question, but if you don't have a ton of time to put into practicing, especially at the beginning when you're learning, then I wouldn't go crazy as far as the price tag is concerned on buying a super expensive guitar that just kind of sits and collects dust for the most part. Now that question feeds into question 2. Question 2 is, what is my budget and how much am I able to spend comfortably to afford this guitar that I'm about to purchase? Now you can shop around online, you can check Guitar Center's website, you can even go on Facebook Marketplace. Sometimes you can get a great deal on there if you're looking, but you really need to sit down and thoroughly think out, what is my budget, how much can I allot for this instrument? Because you definitely don't want to break the bank, especially when you're first starting out. And the third biggest question I would ask myself, especially starting out, is what is my ambition? What do I want to learn to play as far as genre? Do I want to play country songs where I strum a couple chords? Is my ambition to learn how to shred and play super fast guitar solos? You know, kind of sit down and thoroughly think out, what's my ambition here? What am I striving towards by purchasing this guitar? Now I'm going to give you a couple tips based off of these questions and how I personally would answer them. Now remember, these are my opinions, so don't come at me in the comments, just friendly recommendations as to what I would do. So again, if you don't have a ton of time to practice, you have a busy work schedule, life schedule in general, I wouldn't buy something that is exceedingly expensive. I wouldn't spend thousands of dollars. I wouldn't spend $1,000 on a guitar when I'm first starting out and I'm trying to learn how to play. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense, because if life gets in the way, you know, heaven forbid, you know, you don't have a lot of time to practice, you've wasted $1,000 on something you're not really going to get to enjoy or put the time into. Now, as far as price is concerned, again, this is my opinion, but personally, I wouldn't spend any more than probably $500 on my first guitar. To me, that's probably where I would cap myself, because you can get a nice, decent starter guitar for $500 or less. And preferably, I wouldn't spend any less than probably $200, $250 either, because you don't want to buy something that is going to turn you off to the whole learning to play an instrument, learning to play guitar in general. You don't want to buy, as they call them, boat paddles, or, you know, just a piece of crap guitar, for lack of better words. You don't want to buy a piece of junk. Now, as far as what style, genre you want to play, what your ambition is, truthfully, it's probably the least important question on this list, but still important. But it'll kind of dictate probably if you buy an acoustic, electric, you know, what kind of guitar you buy, and you know, the music you listen to, the bands you listen to, they can impact that as well. But truthfully, I would just kind of focus on more so budget and time for the most part. But you know, keep that question in the back of your mind. You know, what's my ultimate ambition with picking this instrument up in the first place? Now, my personal recommendation, this is to anyone starting out that has no prior guitar knowledge other than like picking one up, you know, here and there. You don't really know any chords. You really don't know anything. My ultimate recommendation would be to buy an acoustic. Why wouldn't I buy an electric guitar? Why should I buy an acoustic guitar? My personal opinion, I think it's more advantageous to you, the newcomer, the beginner, you know, the person starting out with this instrument, to buy an acoustic. Because acoustics, usually the strings that you end up putting on them are a little bit thicker, and it's kind of gonna hurt your hand a little more in the beginning, which it sounds like a bad thing, but in my opinion, it's a good thing. You're going to build those calluses on your hand quicker with an acoustic, because typically the strings are thicker on an acoustic guitar. Now, if you start out on electric and then you go to acoustic, it's going to hurt a little bit more doing that. I think starting out on an acoustic is more advantageous because you build that hand strength a little bit faster and you build those calluses on your finger just a little bit quicker. But recommendation, I would start with an acoustic if I was somebody starting, you know, my guitar journey, learning how to play. And that goes for any genre. It doesn't matter if you want to learn heavy metal, you know, rock and roll, blues, doesn't matter. I would still personally recommend buying an acoustic as my first instrument, because when you first learn how to play guitar, you're going to be learning chords for the most part. You're not going to dive straight in, you know, to learning how to play Master of Puppets by Metallica unless that's what you want to do. go for it. But personally, I wouldn't recommend doing that because you're going to be doing a lot of chords. You're probably going to be learning some scales, you know, bar chords, stuff like that. And again, the acoustic, I think, builds better hand strength and calluses on your fingers a little bit quicker. So I would recommend the acoustic just for, you know, the overall player who, no matter what they're going to do, you know, whether, again, if it's heavy metal or country, you know, just playing chords, or pop music, you know, whatever the ambition is, I think an acoustic kind of serves all masters in a way. It fulfills all of the needs that you're going to need that instrument for when learning to play. Now, the ultimate guide to buying a guitar wouldn't be complete without some recommendations as what to buy. So here are a couple of my recommendations as far as what guitars, acoustics or electrics, that I think are good starter beginner guitars that I would recommend to somebody starting out. Now, if you've landed on an acoustic for your first guitar and that's what you've decided you want to go with, here's some of my recommendations. Some of the cheaper models, like an Ibanez V70 CE Dreadnought. I like the Ibanez Dreadnoughts. I think they're pretty nice for the price. The Epiphone Hummingbird I think would be a great choice. This one's on sale. Grab it while you can. Some of the Alvarez models are nice, like this RG260 CESB I think would be a good option. And I'm a big fan of the Epiphone J45 Studio as well for the price. Now, for some of the more expensive models, if you're kind of leaning towards spending a little bit more, being a little more dicey, I think the Epiphone Dove Studio would be a great option. I'm a big fan, again, like I said, of the Epiphone Acoustics. A Guild OM 240 CE I think is a great choice as well, and I also like the Taylor Big Baby Acoustics. I think they're pretty nice for the price. I'm a big Taylor fan, not just because it's my last name either. Now, if you decided on an electric guitar for your first guitar, here's some of the models I would recommend, going from least expensive to most expensive. Now, the Epiphone Les Paul Special 2, I've had probably 2 or 3 of these in my time. I think it is probably the best quality, most budget-friendly electric guitar that you can purchase. I cannot recommend it enough. I'm a big fan of that model. I just think it's great for the price. I would also recommend any of the Jackson JS series, the dinky arch tops like this JS32Q. I think it's a pretty nice model as well. I would also recommend any of the Made in Mexico Fender Strats. Big fan of those. Not the biggest fan of Squire, not because of so much sound difference, but because of a noticeable quality difference in my personal opinion. Wouldn't recommend Squire, but anything made in Mexico, trim level or above, that you can get for under $500, 10 out of 10 recommend. I'd also recommend a Gretsch like this hollow body cutaway, you know, the G2420. I think it would be a great option too. A little more on the pricey side, but still a nice option. But these are just a couple of the recommendations I would make. There's plenty more options out there. I'm not saying that you should or must get one of these, just personal recommendations. If I was shopping as a beginner, I would probably get one of those, just kind of personal opinion. Hopefully this guide has been helpful for you guys. If you have any questions about purchasing, prices, quality, you know, brands, put them in the comments. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Happy to help you guys however I can. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great day.